Morning is Juan at PSL. Thank you for checking out my video. This video is going to be about a pursuit that I was involved in that ended up in Jersey. I'm working plain clothes, steady midnight shift. There's always two-man teams minimum, by the way, when I'm working plain clothes. If you remember seeing some of my other videos, plain clothes is at least two guys. It could be four guys, it could be six guys, it could be eight guys, whatever. I think our whole team might have been 10 or 12, depending on which team I'm trying to recollect from that many years ago. But anyway, this particular story starts off in the Bronx, about the Hunts Point area. I'm working cable theft. When Kuwait was attacked, it created this market that we didn't have before, at least in my knowledge. I mean, some of you guys may know history better than I did, or I do, but we created this market that wasn't there, and Kuwait was buying all the copper cable that they can find. And it created this market, especially in New York. I don't know about other cities. I guess you guys can message me to see if you had the same epidemic that we had. I want to say it was from 1990 to 1995 I was in this unit. It was called Task Force, but we called ourselves the Cable Task Force, Copper Cable Task Force. We did anti-crime, plain clothes. I think we had weekends off, so it was a great detail if you can get it. And this particular night, we're working Hunts Point, and the rule was, there was no rules. Our supervisors were great. I just heard of a couple of them pass away, so I'm so sorry. But anyway, going back to the chase. So we're in a white van for whatever reason. I don't remember why we were in a white van, if that was the only van we had, or I know at one point we got 5 new vans and they were different colors and we switched it amongst ourselves, and some guys preferred one color over the other. Some guys would break the seat because they were so big, whatever, and we had to use milk crates to support the seat. All that kind of stuff. Just normal. If you're a cop, this is normal stuff for you. But for the civilians looking at this video, interesting things happen to us when we're a cop that may not happen to normal people. You protect your cars, you clean it every other week or every week whenever you get a chance, whatever. Our vans I think they were almost 24-hour-a-day turnover. That's the problem with a police department in the 80s. I don't know if it's still true today, but all 3 shifts share the vehicle. So what happens is you get out of the vehicle at the end of the shift, there's a team waiting to come in and get in that vehicle. And then they run it around ragged for 8, 10, 12 hours, however long it takes them. And then there's the team waiting to pick up that vehicle. So it's just one constant 24-hour thing. There might have been a little layover on a Sunday. But the rest of the week, maybe 5 to 6 days a week, those vans are going almost 24/7. Like I said, if you guys that were in my unit see this video and you remember facts better than me, send me a message. I mean, I'm doing a lot of this without a script, and I'm also doing it off the top of my head. Some stuff is 40-something years old. Back again to the pursuit into Jersey. So what happens is we're working the Bronx. We're working around the Hunts Point area. We used to carry 2 radios. We would carry our transit radio because we were still transit police, but we would carry a PD radio. We would go to the nearest precinct or whatever precinct we were going to be working in. A lot of cases it was the 4-0. We would pick up their handheld for the tour. We would sign it out for the tour, and at the end of the tour, before we started heading down to our command, we would turn the radio back in. Simple. And they were glad because that way we were able to hear other jobs besides transit jobs. And we're working the streets looking for copper cable thieves. So these calls wouldn't normally come out on the transit radio anyway, but you still want to know if an officer needs help or there's a major something happening at a train station, major robbery, maybe a shooting, any kind of shooting. But anyway, back once again to my pursuit. Description comes over the air of an NYPD officer that was kidnapped at gunpoint and thrown into like a yellow Toyota. I'll make it up. I don't remember. Yellow Toyota. Well, we're in the Hunts Point area. We're in the general vicinity. And then we make a turn. 2 blocks later, we make a right. There goes this yellow car. And the yellow car takes off. So we take off after him. So we verified that we were, I used to say following, but it was really a pursuit. But transit cringed every time they heard the word, and maybe NYPD too. They cringed when they heard the word pursuit. So we would try to soften the term while we were, speeding after somebody trying to catch them. So they take off. From Hunts Point, they get on the Sheridan. We're behind them. We're putting it over. From the Sheridan, I'm pretty sure it's the Sheridan. Or we end up on the Cross Bronx or whatever it was, and then we end up going over the GW Bridge. As soon as we went over the GW Bridge, my career flashed in front of my eyes. Even though in my heart, I still did it, and I wasn't driving, but I still was okay with it. I just knew transit was going to lose their mind. And by transit, I mean transit upper command, higher, as higher up as you can think of. They were going to lose their mind. So we're doing an honorable thing. We're thinking there's an officer really kidnapped at gunpoint in this vehicle, trapped against his will. And then a patrol supervisor from NYPD, not related to us, we didn't even know who he was, confirmed the job. So as a police officer coming to the assistance of another police officer, you don't hold back. In our case, pursuit into Jersey. So I try to soften the blow, and I can say this many years later, it doesn't matter today, but I try to soften the blow by letting them know, yeah, we're on the GW Bridge, but we're going to get off the first exit and make a U-turn. Well, in fact, that wasn't true. I think we made it to, I don't know what the closest intersection was. If it was Route 4 or 17 South, whatever intersection in Jersey we were in, we were so far away, we lost radio contact. Our radios didn't work. So now I'm sitting there going, oh man, this is not good. I mean, and the car was like always way ahead of us, and to the point where we lost it. And I finally tell my partner, I said, look, we better get back. This is not good. Like I said, as a cop, you're going all out to save another officer, but you also have to realize that NYPD has the ability to notify New Jersey and the surrounding law enforcement communities, whether they're little small towns or little small communities, and they have their own police department. They could have easily put it over the air, and we didn't have to go into Jersey. But the adrenaline's pumping. You're thinking you're doing the right thing. There's no way you're thinking you're doing the wrong thing. That I have to tell you. I'll say it over and over again. We're thinking we're doing the right thing. Well, we do find a way to make a U-turn or work our way back over the bridge. We're coming back into the Bronx. We didn't know it, but a road supervisor from transit had positioned himself where he could see the George Washington Bridge from wherever he was at in the Bronx. I guess he knew where the overlook or the lookout position was, and he's telling Central that we're no way to be seen. It's not true that we're just right on the bridge and we're going to turn around. All this happened without us kind of not knowing. We find this out after the fact, of course. So in you know, today we would say threw me under the bus, which is not the most horrible thing because he is a supervisor. He's not my close relative. He's not going to lose his stripes over me. I'm thinking I'm doing the right thing. The guy I'm working with is thinking we're doing the right thing. So we just knew, being transit officers and having worked in transit, there were certain key words that they lose their mind about. And I'm talking about captain, inspectors, majors. Well, we didn't have majors, but whatever the ranks were high, inspectors and then chiefs, deputy chiefs, whatever, they lose their mind. One of our units went into pursuit into Jersey. Well, the story goes that we were transferred before we were made that U-turn in Jersey to come back. We were already transferred. Upper command had called our supervisor and says, those guys no longer work plain clothes in your unit. So I can laugh about it now, but it was a sad day when we got back and my sergeant walked up to me and says, I'm sorry, Juan, we'll try to get to the end of it, but in the meantime, you're assigned to District 12 Uniform Patrol. And, I took it on the chin. Like I said, deep down in my heart, I thought I did the right thing. And of course, as the tour goes by and maybe the next shift, I don't remember the time frame, but then we start hearing stories that the car that we were chasing lost control in Jersey, overturned, caught on fire, all kinds of things. Today I can see guys were just having fun with it because that's the type of guys that we are. We poke humor at places where normal people wouldn't poke humor at. But being a cop and coming from that world, I'm guilty of it also. I'm not going to play innocent here. I've heard of some bad situations, and when I see the blood clear and the smoke settle, I may throw out a stupid remark just to lighten up my weird sense of humor, along with everybody else's sense of humor. So I show up the next night that I was scheduled to work in uniform. I had a locker in District 12, put on my uniform, my gun belt, show up for patrol. Well, now I'm added to the roll call, to the uniform patrol roll call. And next to my name, the guys took the liberty of drawing a little van and, an arrow chasing. And then it says NJ on this part of New Jersey. Make poking fun of me. And I had to stand there and take it. And I was like, dude, you had to be there, And then, I was an active cop. So I was always chasing. I was always running. I was always doing stuff. So things like this are going to happen. You can have several successful pursuits, and then the wrong one into Jersey, you get thrown under the bus. I think I ended up in patrol at least a couple of weeks. I don't remember, it was a month or two, but it was at least a couple of weeks. I kept quiet. I did my uniform patrol. I wasn't a very good post cop. I had to learn. It was like being on FTO all over again for you guys that are on the job. I knew plainclothes patrol. I knew what we did. Transit required, I think it was 10 or 15-minute entries in your memo book at all times. So if a shoe fly approached you, your book was supposed to be within 10 to 15 minutes up to date. So, and he gave you a scratch if it was, and if he didn't, he wrote you up. And if he wrote you up, it could be anything from, a day suspension to whatever, whatever crime he was accusing you of. So I had to learn this concept with about 90 to 95. So I had to be about 7-8 years on the job, and I'm learning to be a uniform cop. I'm learning to go on the post. I'm learning, being out there at 3 a.m, riding from the trains from one station to the other aimlessly. And it wasn't until I didn't last it long this time. I was only there for a couple of weeks to a month or two. Somebody from my unit that's watching this may remember how long I was, or somebody from District 12. that worked in my time and was there doing the midnight shift. They may remember better. But it was humbling. I never lost my feelings that I was doing the right thing. I know it didn't work out that way. I know it didn't look that way. If you, but then I get a phone call, like I said, don't remember, it was a couple of weeks or 1 or 2 months, from my lieutenant in the plainclothes unit, not the uniform lieutenant, the plainclothes unit. So they said, tell Juan, I guess he told the sergeant, tell Juan if he wants to come back, he come back. Man, I couldn't take off my uniform quick enough because plainclothes is what I liked, what I lived. I like the freedom. I like the way you make your own decisions. When you work in uniform, for those of you civilians, you get assigned posts, and unless something happens that you have to take police action, you're required to work your post in the directions that the post requires. You may have 1 o'clock, be here because the booth is closing down and they want to make sure the clerk doesn't get robbed on the way home or on the way on the train to go turn in her bags, tokens or whatever, or report whatever. And then it may say, 4 o'clock, do the booth escorts as I did in the previous video, or 4:30 or whatever it was in the morning. This is all midnight shift, by the way. I worked most of my career midnights. And then you may get, 6 o'clock, go down on 149th and 3rd and, be ready for the rush hour. So you go down there 10 minutes earlier, you go upstairs, you get something to drink, maybe ham and egg sandwich at the most, and get ready for your shift. Use the restroom and be out there standing tall. There's a transfer station, so that means people paid with tokens, and they also got transfers on the buses to come down and continue their journey for free with this transfer, paper transfer, and they would shove it in the box. So a lot of people knew the cops were seeing thousands of people going through the station in an hour. I mean, it might have been more than thousands. It might have been tens of thousands, the rush hour. It was called a rush hour condition for a reason. So anyway, your normal law-abiding citizen is going to take his transfer from the bus and go downstairs. But there was some that would give it to guys that were standing on the corner, hand collecting, like peddling, like asking for tips. So they would give it to them and go downstairs and make believe they put something in the box. Either their hand was empty or they had a piece of tissue and put it in the box. You're not standing there verifying all these transfers. It's just too many. It's tens of thousands of passengers coming down. Even the most active officer, you're not going to do. It's just too much work for no big payoff. Even if you catch a person putting it down there, it's just, hopping the train is a ticket or a misdemeanor depending on the situation, and your supervisor on that condition was not going to authorize you to make an arrest just to get out of there, and now the station's not covered. It was a 2-man post, but the station was that busy. Transit primarily was a 1-man post unless you had a car, and there was only 2 cars in the whole district, and the whole district was the 2, the 6, the 2 and the 6 trains. Yeah, that's the 2. I thought there were more, but anyway, those were primarily that were covered in that particular area. Of course, other districts cover other stations under the other train lines. So guys upstairs, if they sold their transfers, so let's say the subway fare was 50 cents or 60 cents or whatever it was back in those days, they would sell it to you for a quarter. You were happy you weren't paying the 60 cents, and they were happy they got a quarter. And you times that by however successful they are, hundreds or whatever they got, hundreds of quarters, 1,000 quarters, whatever it was. So every now and then, not only were you busy and hope that somebody didn't fall down the stairs, and hope somebody didn't get their bag snatched, and hopefully the train didn't hit somebody, and hopefully there wasn't a fight on the train that the conductor's trying to get your attention to go over there, so you have to leave your post. They would come down, the guys that were collecting, hand collecting, the peddlers. I'm trying to think the right word for I don't think it's peddlers, but anyway, they would go and put their whole hand into the basket of transfers, take them out, and run back upstairs. Again, if you were lucky in this whole turmoil of all these tens of thousands of people coming and you saw them, are you going to go chase them? Because even if you chase them, it's still a misdemeanor nonsense crime. You know, again, is the sergeant going to authorize you to leave the station? Because as soon as the sergeant hears that you're holding one at 149 and 3rd Avenue, for example, he's going to go there and verify the arrest. You had some sergeants that were pretty flexible, but I don't think they were going to be flexible during a rush hour condition because there's just so much going on. And maybe you have to be from New York to understand that. Maybe, I know these videos are being watched countrywide and numerous jurisdictions, obviously. And maybe it's not that busy. Maybe the rush hour is, from 8:30 to 9 o'clock, So over here, the rush hour is a couple of hours. And like I said, you have buses unloading into the train station, not counting all the passengers that were already on the train approaching your station. So a lot, really busy. But that was my story on pursuit to Jersey. I had to do uniform patrol against my will, but I did it. And then I was invited back, and I couldn't have been happier. Hey, I thank you for your time. I hope this is not the first video you see of me. I got quite a few videos lining up now. Please like and subscribe. And I do appreciate time. Thank you. Appreciate it.